Temurah Daf. We're going to learn a very fundamental machlokes between Abaye and Rava for all of Shas. And the Gemara is going to bring 14 examples from the Torah to see if Abaye is right, if Rava is right. At the end of the day, it's not clear if there's even a machlokes between Abaye and Rava. The machlokes is, in a lav, when the Torah says, don't do something, and you go ahead and do it, did your actions have an effect? For instance, if the Torah says to a Kohen Gadol, don't marry an almana, and he goes ahead and he marries the widow, is the Kedushin Chal? Is it Taifas? Now we know it is, so Rav is going to answer, there's a special pasuk that says it does. And that's how the whole sugi is going to go. Every time we have a question, there's a special pasuk that tells us that it's different in this case. The Gemara starts off with the case we had yesterday. Somebody rapes a woman, he must marry her and keep her for the rest of his life. What happens if he's over on that and he divorces her? According to Rav, it's a big problem. Why doesn't he get malchus? Because really we have two machlokes in here. Machlokes is, does it take effect when you are over in a lav? And second of all, why does one get malchus? According to Abaye, one gets malchus because he took action that had an effect. And according to Rava, you get malchus because he was over on Hashem's words. So according to Rava, since he was over, the Torah said, don't divorce her, you should get malchus immediately. And the answer is because it says, Kol Yamav, there's no Isser until his days pass by. The Isser keeps on going until the end of his life, so there's no time to give him malchus. The question is also on Abaye. Abaye says that anytime you're over in a lab, it takes effect. Over here, you see, it doesn't take effect. By divorcing this woman, you have to remarry her. In other words, the divorce wasn't effective. It was effective for a very short period, but immediately afterwards, you have to remarry her. That means it didn't really have an effect. Gemara says, because it says Kol Yamav, special limud, that it doesn't have an effect, in this case only, by Yonas. The halacha is, the Torah says, you have to take truma from your beautiful fruit on your not so nice fruit, and not in the reverse. You're not allowed to take truma from not good fruit on the good fruit. What happens if a person went ahead and took truma from the bad on the good? It's a good truma. The question is on Rava. How is it chal? It shouldn't be effective. And the answer is because there's a special pasuk by truma that says, V'leisisu olav chait. If you take truma from the good on the bad, you're not going to have an aveira, says the Torah. But if you could be medayik, you can infer from here that if you took from the bad on the good, you do have an aveira. So the Torah is telling us specifically in this case, it does have an effect b'di'evet. The Torah says, don't take truma from one product on another product, from olives on grapes, for instance. And if you do, it doesn't have an effect. That's a question on Abaye, who says it does have an effect. The answer is because the Torah says, Reishi Sam, to tell us that it has an effect, that it doesn't have an effect in this case. According to Rava, what do I do with Reishi Sam? I don't need it to tell us that from one grain to another, let's say from barley to wheat, it has an effect. It doesn't have an effect. You cannot take truma from shibai l'shual and chita, for instance, or from wheat to wine. We learned about cherem of a kohen just recently in Erechim. If a person says this object should be cherem, he could either do it to bedek abayis, he could do it to the kohen. In this case, he does it to the kohen. It becomes kodesh to the kohen until the moment he gives it to the kohen, then it goes to become chulin. But when it's in his possession, he's not allowed to sell it, not allowed to redeem it. And if he does, it doesn't have an effect. The question is on Abaye. Abaye says it always has an effect. The answer is because it says who. What's Rava going to do with this who? He doesn't need it. It doesn't have an effect. The answer is usually a bachar, you cannot remove the kedusha, you can't redeem the kedusha. But a bachar, you're allowed to sell. I learned that from the word who. Temurah, our sugya, that the Torah says, do not take animal B and make it instead of animal A. What happens if you do? You don't listen to the Torah. The kedusha is chal on animal B. Why? According to Rava, it shouldn't have any effect. And the answer is because it says specifically in the Torah, hu usmurasai kodesh. And according to Abaye, it tells us a major chiddush that they are both kodesh. I would think that the kedusha transfers from A to B. Kamash Milan, the kedusha remains in A, and B also becomes kodesh. We're going to take two cases and put them together here. The Gemara asks, what about redeeming a bechar? What about redeeming meiser behema? If you try to do that, it doesn't work. According to Abaye, it should work because it says in the pasuk kodesh heim. What does Rava do with the word heim? Rava learns that even if the bloods of a bechar and another animal mix, and the bechar blood is a miut, it should be batal b'rayv, you could still do hazah, you could sprinkle on his back, and I learned from that all karbanos. Abaye says I learned that from Yom Kippur, where I take the bull's blood and I mix it with the goat's blood, and the Torah calls it goat's blood, even though the blood of the bull is much more, it should be batal b'rayv. You see, that's not batal. And Rava says, no, on Yom Kippur we don't mix bloods anyways. The Torah says, Lashem hu, by a bechar, to teach us that when you do temurah by a bechar, yes, the temurah is is chal on the second animal, but unlike all karbanis where you take the second animal and you put it on the mizbeach, by a bchar and meiser you don't put on the mizbeach. We learned yesterday, there's a very specific order how you take trumas and meisers. First bikurim, then truma, then meiser rishon, then meiser sheni. If a person took truma before bikurim, it's a deraisa, but it's chal. Why is it chal according to Rav? It shouldn't be chal, and it's the Gemara because it says in the pasuk mikol mat nesechem tarimu. According to Abaya, I learned a very interesting halacha from here. Typically, you take 2% truma from your product and give it to the kohen. You're left with 98%. From the 98%, you take 10% of that and give that to the Levi. In other words, the Levi gets 9.8%. What happens if you gave the Levi before the kohen? You gave him 10% of your product. So, in other words, he has a little bit of the kohen's 2% in his product. Can the kohen go and sue the Levi for it, that he should return it? And the answer is, if the Yisrael gave it to the Levi when it was still b'shibalin, meaning the unfinished product, it still had the shaft on it and everything, then the kohen cannot take it from the Levi. But if the Yisrael gave it to the Levi when it was bikri, when it was a smooth pile of grain, then the kohen can take it from the Levi. Why? Because now it's more of a dagan, it's wheat, it's grain. And how do I know that? From the pasuk of Mikol mat nesechem tarimu, says Abaya. And almana l'kohen gadol, a kohen gadol cannot marry a widow. What if he does? The kedushin is chal. Why is it chal? According to Rava, it shouldn't be kedushin, and the answer is because it says in the pasuk le'ichalel. The pasuk is saying that the offspring from this marriage is a chalal, meaning not a mamzer but a chalal. So the Torah is telling you that the kedushin works. What does Abai do with the word le'ichalel? To tell us that there's two chilulim here. It's a double chilul. First of all, she, the almana, is mechulal. In other words, if she was a baskoy and she has a halach of a zayna who cannot eat truma anymore for the rest of her life, and the offspring is a chalal. And finally, for today, if somebody is magdish a balmum to the mizbeach, he takes an animal that has a blemish and he's not supposed to bring it to the mizbeach, and he brings it anyways, it's chal. According to Rav, it shouldn't be chal, and the answer is because it says in the pasuk lo yerotza. The person doesn't get a kapara for that, but it is chal.